Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Rose, and I am an alcoholic. My home group is the Wise Women Group. It's a women's meeting that meets Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock in Spring Hill, Florida. So if you're a woman and you're in Spring Hill, please come. We'd love to have you. I have a sponsor, and I love the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I never thought that I would feel that way. I want to take a moment and thank you for inviting me to speak here today. It's always an honor and a privilege to be able to get to do that. And I love Kansas. I love Kansas. This is my third time here, and it just gets better and better each time. I get to see people. The last two women who hosted me are here with their husbands, and that just warms my heart. It's so good to see them again. And then there's Joy and Darren. And I just want to state what the other speakers have stated, that this is such a well-run conference. And they just make you feel so welcome. And they're so thoughtful. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you. And Leslie has been terrific, and she's been kind and thoughtful, too. So I'm kind of socially awkward, so you've all made it quite easy for me to be here, so I thank you for that. Alcoholics Anonymous is the best thing I never wanted. I never thought an alcoholic of my type could ever get sober. And when I share my story with you, you'll kind of see where alcoholism took me. But I'm here today, and I'm here by the grace of God. And again, it's an honor and a privilege to allow you to see who I really am. And that was something I never wanted anybody to see about me. I spent a lifetime building a facade, and I just wanted you to see who I thought I was. But now I get to be vulnerable, and I get to expose my deepest, darkest secrets, because Alcoholics Anonymous tells me that's the only way I get to live today. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I'm originally from New Jersey. I am 61 years old. I've never been married. I've never had children. I come from a good family. My parents stayed together till they both passed away. I have two older brothers and a younger sister. I came from a good family. My parents sent me to Catholic school for 12 years. They did their job. But I've never felt comfortable in my skin. I can only describe growing up as I always felt blue. There was a deep sadness inside of me that I could never explain. And I'm incredibly shy and awkward socially, so that didn't make it much easier. I followed behind my brothers in school, and they were everything that I wasn't. They were popular, and they were handsome, and they were athletic, and I just was none of those things. I was just really awkward. For the older people in the audience, I don't know if you remember Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine. Okay, so I'm like his sister, right? I'm overweight, I have bright red hair, and I have a gap between my teeth that you could drive a Volkswagen through. So I was never that girl, right? I wasn't the cute little blonde. I was awkward, and I had friends, and I had a good life. I just never felt comfortable. My mother is a Scottish immigrant, and my father is Irish and German, so as you can well imagine, there might be alcohol somewhere in my past. Another Irish Catholic story, right? So, and I do remember that I would see my family at parties, my aunts and uncles, and they would have a few drinks, and they'd loosen up, and they'd have a few more, and they would sing. So I always equated alcohol to social things and to good times. And I remember as a kid trying alcohol. You know, somebody would leave a drink down on a table, and I remember distinctly that I didn't like the taste of alcohol. And to this day, I don't like the alcohol. I've never liked the taste of it. I'm someone who drinks for effect only. By the time I was 14, I decided to drink for the first time. It was for a high school dance, and I asked my older brother to please buy me beer before the dance, because that's what everybody did. And he said, I don't think that's a good idea. And I said, but that's what you do. And so I bugged him, and he eventually bought me the 6-pack of beer, because I was determined to fit in. I was determined to have fun. I was determined to try to have a life in spite of myself. So I distinctly remember it, because it was a 6-pack of Rheingold Tall Boys. Now you know how old I am. And I remember that I drank 3 beers, and my life changed forever. I can still feel the way it felt when it went down my throat and into my stomach. And I had found the solution to the awkwardness that was always me. It's not that I thought I was smart or pretty or popular or any of those things. It was that I just didn't care that I wasn't. And that was my solution for a very, very long time. I drank alcoholically from the beginning. I never had a social relationship with alcohol. I am one person that never understands how people can eat and drink. That makes no sense to me. You either do one or the other. and I never wanted to share, and I knew early on that it meant too much to me. By the time I was 15 years old, I had my first bout with alcohol poisoning. I was in the woods drinking with my friends, and I drank so much that I was rendered unconscious. They had to drag me to help, call an ambulance. I was sent to the hospital, and most people would say, well, probably shouldn't do that again, right? What I thought was maybe I shouldn't drink the vodka straight down, because I had no desire to stop drinking. By the time I'm 16 years old, I'm going to bars every day after school. I had a fake ID. It said I was Gina Sabatino. If they were paper back then, you could get away with it, and I was hanging out in bars after school. By the time I was 17 years old, my father sat me down and he said, Rose, you have all the earmarks of being an alcoholic. And my father was a bartender, so if he knew anything, he knew that his daughter sitting in front of him was an alcoholic. And I knew my father was right. I absolutely, without exception, knew that it meant too much to me. But I also knew that I was never going to stop. Because at that point, I couldn't imagine my life without alcohol. It's the only thing that made my life bearable. I often think that it saved my life in some ways, which is kind of a strange paradox, right? I've always been kind of suicidal, and I've always kind of thought about killing myself, and I think alcohol kept me alive. I think it stopped the thoughts and the feelings that I had long enough for me to just get through the feeling of suicide. By the time I graduated high school, my parents told me that I was supposed to go to college. I didn't know that. Right now, I'm a full-fledged alcoholic. I'm full-blown at 17 years old. And I guess that what I realize now as a sober woman, that my alcoholism took away my desire to do anything or be anything more than I was at that absolute moment. But they told me I should go to school, so I said, okay. And I enrolled in a community college that was local, and I lasted 3 whole months. And I said, this isn't for me. I want to work. I'm a worker. And I've always been a worker. I mean, I think I worked the way I drank. I work alcoholically. When I was 9, I didn't have 1 paper route. I had 2. I babysat for everybody in the neighborhood. I wanted money. And the reason I wanted money is money could buy me things, right? It could buy me things that made me feel better about myself. If I could hide behind the right outfit or the right pocketbook and wear the right makeup, I felt like I was a whole person, when in fact I was not whole at all. I was empty inside. I dropped out of school and I started working full-time, and I was able to get a great job in a Fortune 500 company, and I went in at an entry level, and because I work as hard as I do, I kind of climbed the ladder pretty quickly, and I was making a lot of money. I was 20 years old, and I never had a serious relationship with a man. The only relationship I had up until that point is with alcohol. And I met a man. He was the older brother of a friend of mine, and I immediately fell in love with him. And I would like to tell you that it was his, sense of style, it was his kindness, but it was his alcoholism. That's what drew me to him. I fell in love with his alcoholism because somebody like me has to be with somebody who drinks like me, or else I'm going to look abnormal, and I spend a lifetime trying to look normal. So I would spend the next 13 years of my life with this man. About 2 years into the relationship, which I can't explain in any other way but to say it was extremely toxic. Because we didn't do anything. We didn't go to the movies. We didn't go to dinner. We didn't dance. We drank, and that's all we did. And 2 years into this relationship, my parents and his parents decided to have a conversation because they said, we have to break these two up. They're going to kill each other. And they were right. That's how dangerous this relationship was. But what I heard was they're trying to keep us apart. What I knew is that we were Romeo and Juliet, and no matter what, we're going to stay together. So when I was, I was living at home up until the point I was 25 years old. I had a pretty good gig. I didn't think so back then, but I paid $20 a week rent. I had a swimming pool. I did whatever I want. And then my parents decided to move and retire to Florida and kick their 25-year-old daughter, who was making a ton of money, out into the street. So they moved to Florida, and I moved in with this man because that made sense, right? And the moment I moved in with him, he stopped working. Well, of course he did, right? And this is the beginning of good enough is good enough, and Rose will settle for anything. And our relationship went from bad to worse. It started with subtle types of emotional abuse, right? And then it was psychological abuse. He would actually put trip lines with fishing wire on the top of the stairway, and I would fall down them. And he made a point of making me feel that I was less than human. He would accuse me of being disloyal in the relationship. And eventually he started to not only rape me, he would physically abuse me. I remember one time my parents came up from Florida for a visit, and I had a black eye, and my father looked at me and he said, "Rose, what happened?" And I said, "Oh, I was bending down and Mark opened the door and it hit me in the eye." And my father looked at me and he said, "Baby, you've got one time to tell me that story." And what I didn't know was our neighbors were frequently calling the police because of the domestic violence that was happening in my home. And they also published that information in the newspaper. And what I didn't know is that my brothers were reading that information and telling my parents. And that my parents knew, better than to try and extract me from that relationship, they knew I had to make a decision to leave it, or they would lose me. And I was unable to do that. I was so sick in my own alcoholism that I stayed in this relationship. He would tell me things like, "If you tell anyone, I will kill you. If you tell anyone, I will hurt your family." And because I'm so sick myself, I believe him. And I stay in a relationship that is so dangerous and so toxic. I was doing well at work, and it was getting worse and worse for me. And he was in and out of detoxes trying to get sober because, you see, he's the problem. If he would just get sober, my life would be fine. If he would just get sober, it would all work. Now, I have no intention of getting sober because, you see, I'm a high-functioning, managing alcoholic. I'm paying the bills. I'm going to work. So he needed to address his problem, and therefore my life would get better. Like I said, he was in and out of detoxes frequently, and one time he came out and he said, "Rose, I'd like for you to come with me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous." And that's the last place in the world someone like me wants to go. And I went to this meeting, and it was a speaker meeting, and it was in a hospital, and I'll never forget it. I walked in, and the hair on the back of my neck stood straight up, and I was uncomfortable, and I sat down, and a woman got up to a podium much like this, and she introduced herself. And for the next hour, I sat there and I cried. And I didn't know that that was my first connection with another alcoholic. I couldn't understand how she could put into words what I had been feeling for my entire life. And after the meeting, she did exactly what we're supposed to do. She came and she reached out her hand to me and she said, "You don't have to live like that anymore. There's a better way." And she tried to help me. She said, "Don't drink and go to meetings." And I heard go to meetings, and I would show up drunk. And she would force me, meeting after meeting after meeting, to read the promises. And she told me if I would do what she did, that they would come true for me. But I didn't want to do what she did. So she convinced me to go to rehab. So, of course, I go to rehab, and my man goes to rehab, because we do everything together. We're a power couple. So we both go to rehab. I do my 28 days. I get a little chip at the end that says, "You're never going to drink again. You are special." And I come out and I go to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I take absolutely none of your suggestions. I don't do it. And sure enough, within 2 months, both of us are drinking again. And the relationship is worse than it was before. It was so bad that at the end of this relationship, I used to go to a hotel every weekend, and I would stay there because I couldn't stand to be around him. Around this time, he had taken a fall. He was drunk and he fell down a flight of stairs, and he broke his neck. And now I'm really stuck. I was almost at the point where I thought I could walk away from him. I was almost at the point where I thought I was strong enough to just separate and go and live my life because he's the problem. And now he's in the hospital and he's broken his neck and he's lost use of his arms and his legs. Not complete use. He was what they call a quadriplegic. He had limited use. Now I'm stuck. Because what are you going to think of me if I leave a man like this? What kind of a piece of garbage am I? And I stayed. And it was just getting worse and worse, and he continued to drink. And the reason he continued to drink is because I continued to buy it for him. I bought it for him because if I gave him something to drink, maybe he'd leave me alone that night. If I gave him something to drink, maybe I could have a few minutes of peace. And if I gave him something to drink, maybe I could drink too, which I had every intention of doing. My mother came up from Florida for a visit, and he was in the hospital at this time. He used to bleed from his esophagus. He had varices of the esophagus, and he would have these terrible bleeds, and he would be rushed to the hospital. And on one of these trips, my mother just happened to be there, and she went to the hospital with me to see him. And when she saw me, she saw that her daughter was dying in front of her eyes. And see, my parents never knew that I had relapsed because I lied to them and I told them I was sober. He had relapsed, but I hadn't. So for 10 years, my family thought that I was sober and that he was the problem. And I just didn't call them at 3 in the morning, you know, when you make those random drunk phone calls. I just didn't call my parents. And if I went down to visit them, I would white knuckle it until I couldn't do it anymore, and I would buy a bottle and I would sneak it into the guest room and I would drink when they were asleep. But here she comes, and she goes to the hospital with me to see this man. And all I know is I have been trying to get away from this man for years, and I've never had the strength to do it. And my 4'11" Scottish mother goes in to see him, walks back out of the room and says, "That's it, Rose, it's over." And I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You're not going back to him. He's not coming home." And I'm thinking to myself, where have you been for 13 years when I've been living with this loser? You go in there for 3 minutes and it's over. And I was no longer with this man, and I thought my life was going to magically get better. I thought now, since he is the problem, that my life is going to work. I'm going to find joy. It's going to be wonderful. And none of those things happened for me. I knew alcohol was the problem, but I also knew I would never stop drinking. I used to try to tell myself on the way home from work as I'm white-knuckling it, see, I couldn't drink in the morning because I was so sick from the night before. I had to use other things in the morning to help with my nausea, but I couldn't drink. And by the time I got out of work at night, I would be white-knuckling it, and I would say to myself, just don't stop at the liquor store, Rose, just don't. And I'd stop at the liquor store. And then I'd say, just don't go in, and next thing you know, I'm in there, just don't buy a bottle. And if it was going to snow, I would buy 4. You know, I always had to. And I just to give you an idea of the type of alcoholic I am, I drank a handle of whiskey every night. 1.75 liters of whiskey every night for many, many years. And every morning I woke up in a puddle of my own urine and I was vomiting. That's how sick I was. And yet it never occurred to me that I could stop drinking, or should I stop drinking. It was the only thing I knew that was the solution to who I was. So here I am, knowing alcoholism is my problem, knowing that the booze has to go and I can't do it. I can't imagine my life without without alcohol. So I decide, well, maybe, you know, here I am, I'm in my mid-30s, maybe I need to be social. I'm not social. I drink at home alone. I'm a hermit drunk. Maybe if I went out a little bit or did some things or went to the movies, I would find something in my life. I'd find meaning. And so I did some things. I went to a movie here or there, but everything in my life, every decision I made revolved around my drinking. I had to have a certain time. I couldn't drink before a certain time because I had to get drunk, and if I passed out too early, I'd be up in the middle of the night, and it controlled me. I mean, I can't tell you the things that I've missed in my life because I couldn't stop drinking. So I decided to become more social, and I'm hanging out with people at work that are a little bit younger than me, doing things that I hadn't done in years. And by that I mean extracurricular illegal activities. And I was a willing participant, and they said, Rose, why don't you come out with us? You never do anything. You never go anywhere. And I don't go anywhere because I can't drink like I need to drink when I go anywhere. And drinking is my number one priority. So I said, nah, you know, I'm good. We'll just go shopping during the day or something. They said, no, Rose, you know, you never come out with us. Come out with us. And so I agreed to go out with them, and it was November 25th, 1998. It was the night before Thanksgiving. And what I didn't know as a woman of 35 was that that's a big night out in the bars. All the kids come home from college, so it's busy. And at this point in my alcoholism, I am suffering from every phobia you can imagine. I am claustrophobic. I'm agoraphobic. I mean, I actually remember scaling the wall in my apartment and just peeking out the door to see if it was safe to run to my car, that I wouldn't run into anybody. I was filled with terror all the time. So I agreed to go out with these people, and I do what I think is, you know, mandatory, which is drink before I go. I mean, I can't imagine showing up at any event where you don't drink first. So I had a couple of drinks, and I met them, and I walk into this bar, and it's crazy crowded, and I'm uncomfortable. And so I have a couple drinks, and I'm like, you know what? This has been great. I've had a super great time. I'm going to head out now. Because in my head, I know I've got to go home. I've got to get drunk. I've got to get up. I've got to get sick. I got to make myself look presentable because I've got to go to my brother's house for Thanksgiving the next day. And again, they think I'm sober. So I say my goodbyes. I said, it's been great. See you later. And I walked to my car, and it never occurred to me that I was in no condition to drive. I'm a professional alcoholic, and I didn't drink much in that bar. And there's a couple of reasons why I didn't drink much in that bar. First of all, the drinks are way too small. If you drink like I drink, and this is how I drank, I would fill a red Solo cup up with whiskey, put a dash of Sprite on the top, and I would drink it down in one sip. And there were times when I would vomit it right back up, and I would drink it down again. So these little bar drinks that are super expensive just don't do it for Rose. So I know I have to get home so I can drink, because I need to drink. So I get in my car, I turn the key on, and it never occurred to me, because I'm a professional alcoholic. I haven't had that much to drink. And I started to drive home. And my home was 17.3 miles from the bar that I was at. And it was a rainy night. And I lived in a very rural part of northwest New Jersey. No streetlights, lots of deer, bear. And I'm driving home literally around the corner from my apartment. And I am a smoker. And I dropped my cigarette. And when I bent down to pick up my cigarette, I hit something. And I convinced myself it must have been a deer, it had to have been something, and I panicked. And I didn't stop. And one of the reasons that I didn't stop was because the police department was about 100 yards down on the left-hand side. Because only an alcoholic like me would hit something almost directly in front of the police station. So I turned the corner, I went into my apartment, and I started talking to a friend of mine. And I said, it's raining, it's pouring out, and I hit something on the way home right up on Wolf Road, which was the next street up, and my windshield shattered. I said, so I need to get a tarp or something to cover that. And he said, oh, no problem, Rose, I'll come over and I'll help you. And sure enough, within a few minutes, he pulled into the parking lot, I walked out, and we got this tarp, and we went to cover the windshield of my car. And in the upper right-hand corner was a tuft of hair and part of a human forehead. And my life stopped. I said, oh my God, take me back. And I got in his truck and we turned the corner and I could see the cop cars and I could see the ambulance and I knew it wasn't a deer. And I said, take me home. And for years I tried to convince myself that I did that to protect him. I didn't want to pull him into this. I didn't want him to have to be involved in this. But the simple fact of the matter is I was paralyzed with fear. I didn't know what to do. So I went home. I didn't hide my car. I didn't run. I knew eventually someone would find me. And I did the only thing that I know how to do, which is I drink. And I continue to drink. And several hours later, there's a knock on my door, and it's the Mount Olive Police Department, and they say, Ms. Heshman, it looks as though your vehicle's been involved in a car accident. We need to bring you in for questioning. And they did. They questioned me for 5 hours, and then they told me I'd struck and killed a 45-year-old man that was walking in the road. And I didn't know it because I didn't stop. And the police were so kind to me, and they said, Rose, why don't you get bailed out? This was just an accident. Get somebody here to help you. And I didn't want to. I wanted them to take me directly to jail. But eventually I called a friend of mine. She came and she bailed me out, and I went on a mission to kill myself. I could literally walk home from the police department. That's how close I was. And I knew that the jig was up. I knew that my life was over. I knew whatever was going to happen from this point forward, I cannot get through. I cannot live through this. And I decided I was going to kill myself. And my mother called me because now the jig's up. Everybody knows. And she says, Rose, I need you to do two things. I need you to get an attorney, and I need you to get help. So I checked myself into a psychiatric unit, and I stayed there for 11 days, and then they told me I wasn't well enough to go home by myself, which is true, I was not. And I went to a crisis center for adults. My decision at this crisis center was to have an affair with my counselor, because that's what I do. I do anything but look at myself. Right? I distract myself from me. If I'm with you, I don't have to worry about me. If I'm with you, I don't have to address the issues. And I often wonder what this counselor was thinking. Right? Why would you even want to be near somebody as broken and as damaged as I was? And I often think maybe perhaps he's one of those guys that wanted to ride in on his white horse and save me, but nothing was going to save me. Eventually, I tried to go back to work, to this great job that I had, and I found I couldn't do it. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't get past it. I couldn't even remember to take a shower or how to brush my teeth. I was so broken. The only thing that made sense to me was to end it all. So I moved in with him. Because again, that's what I do. So now I'm not working and I'm drinking. I'm going to drink because that's what I do. That's the only thing I know how to do. And eventually he said to me, Rose, if you drink one more time, you've got to go. Well, you don't tell an alcoholic like me not to drink. You go to work, I go to the liquor store. That's what I do. And sure enough, he said, you've got to go. And I have nowhere to go. So what I technically did is I bail jumped. I went from New Jersey to Florida to my parents' house because I had nowhere to go. I never missed a court appearance. I never missed a hearing. But technically, I was illegally in the state of Florida. And I remember just thinking to myself, this is really going to suck because now I'm going to have to kill myself in my parents' spare bedroom. And I went on a mission to do that. But my parents would do so many things to try to protect me from me. They didn't give me any money, and I didn't have any money of my own. I used to collect dollars and change because I knew I'm going to buy a bottle somewhere because I can't commit suicide if I'm not drunk. So I remember one of these times I'd finally gotten enough money together to get a bottle, and I just told my parents I'm going for a walk. And of course, because Rose has no sense of direction, there's a liquor store, right around the corner this way, but I walk 9 miles that way. With my knapsack, which is mandatory accessories for any alcoholic woman. You have to have a knapsack. So next thing I know, I'm almost back at my parents' house, and my father pulls up next to me in his car, and he goes, get in. And he said, where were you? I said, I just went for a walk. And he said, oh, okay. So he pulls into the driveway, and as I go to get out of the car, he grabs my knapsack. And he walks into the kitchen, and he opens the bottle, and I watch him. He said, Rose, I love you. And he started pouring it down the drain. And I couldn't get over it. I need that. Don't do that. I need that. And he said, I love you. My parents used to do things just to give their daughter 5 minutes of peace. They didn't know how to help me, but they would say, get in the car, and they would take me up to the beach to watch the sunset. And they would sit up on the bench, and I would sit in the sand, just thinking of how can I end this all. And all they were trying to do was give me 5 minutes of peace. Around this time, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, had found Recovery in the Rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had come to dinner at my parents' house. And him and my sister and their 2 small children, and he did the most horrible thing that anybody could ever do. He stood up after he had eaten dinner, and he said, Rose, I'm going to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Why don't you come with me? And I hated him. And my father looked at me over the top of his glasses like he had when I was 17 years old and told me I was an alcoholic. And he said, baby, I don't think you have a choice. And I went to my very first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous in Florida. And I couldn't tell you what anyone looked like because I was looking at my shoes. The only thing I could get out of my mouth is, my name is Rose and I'm an alcoholic. And I couldn't share and I couldn't connect. And every night that bum would show up and drag me to another meeting. And it started getting a little bit easier. And I started feeling a little more comfortable. And I stopped trying to kill myself. Well, around this time, because I'm well now, right? I've done absolutely nothing in the program. I'm just going to meetings. I'm well now. I reconnect with this counselor, and I start traveling back and forth from Florida to New Jersey because I'm in love. And on one of these trips, my sister called me, and she said, you need to get home. Dad's really sick. He had had a minor heart attack on the golf course, and when they got him to the hospital, they realized that he had end-stage leukemia. And he had a very short time to live. So I came home and I went to see him, and I did what I am so grateful to have had the opportunity to do, and I did my amends to my father. And within a week, my father passed away. And I was there in the room when he left this world, and I thought, what a precious moment. And then my decision was not to continue on and seek recovery. My decision was I'm going to go back to New Jersey and be with this man. Never once did it occur to me, my mother has just lost her husband of 50 years. She is broken. Never once did it occur to me that I should stay there and support her and help her, or even stay there and help myself. My decision was to go and be with this man because he is my higher power and this is the only thing that matters to me. And I left my mother and I went back to New Jersey to be with this man. I knew that I was going to trial within a few months. It actually took 2.5 years from the time of the accident for me to go to trial. And I knew I was going soon, so I better just make the most of the last of my time because it's all about me. And I no sooner landed on the ground in New Jersey and I was not only drinking again, I was doing anything I could get my hands on, and I was pregnant. And I knew I was pregnant. And I couldn't stop drinking. And I couldn't stop putting things in my body. And I told this man, and he was not pleased. He took me to Planned Parenthood because he probably didn't believe me. Why would you believe me? I'm a liar, right? There's nothing honest or truthful about me. And sure enough, he became convinced I was pregnant, and he was so unhappy, and I was devastated. And I couldn't stop drinking. And he said, Rose, if you drink one more time, you got to go. So once again, he goes to work and I go to the liquor store because that's all I know how to do. Sure enough, the next morning, he took me to Newark Airport, paid $750 to send me one way to Florida. You know somebody really wants you gone when they're willing to part with that kind of money just to get rid of you. So I remember sitting in the airport in Tampa and waiting for my sister and my AA sponsor to pick me up. And I'm sitting there with 2 very large glasses of whiskey, completely intoxicated, and my sister finds me and she says, how are you? I said, I'm drunk, how are you? She said, better than you. And I said, I'm pregnant. And that's the last time I ever uttered those words. From that moment on, from that day on, every night I went to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I drove there illegally because the state of New Jersey had already taken my license away. And every day on the way to that meeting, I would stop at the liquor store and I would buy a bottle. And I would sit in that meeting completely a liar, completely nothing authentic about me, just watching the clock tick, not being able to wait for it to hit the hour so this was over and I could go home and drink. Eventually, in January of 2001, I left the state of Florida and went to New Jersey to stand trial. My trial lasted 3.5 weeks. During the course of that trial, I miscarried, which is a blessing because I did nothing right for this child. After 3.5 weeks, I was found guilty on 3 counts. I was found guilty of leaving the scene of an accident, death by auto, and possession of less than 50 milligrams of CDS. I was immediately shackled and handcuffed in that courtroom, and I was sent to the county jail. They put me on suicide watch, and all I remember doing is picking up the phone and calling my mother over and over saying, get me out of jail. Get me out of jail, because I could be bonded out until I'm sentenced. And she would hang up on me, and I would call her again. I said, if this was one of your sons, you'd get them out of jail, and she'd hang up on me. Eventually, she came to see me at the county jail, and I'll never forget it. Here we are between that 2 panes of glass on a telephone, and my mother was tiny. She was 4'11", and she looked at me, and she said, Rosellen, I love you, and I'm going to save your life. I'm not getting you out of jail. And she hung up the phone, and she walked away. And I hated her. I hated her for leaving me there. What I didn't know is that she's crying the whole way to the car. What I didn't know is this woman has just lost her husband, and now she's about to lose her daughter. Because I don't care about her. I only care about me. And she left me there for 4 months until I was sentenced. I was sentenced to 12 years and 30 days in the only female penitentiary in the state of New Jersey. And I'll never forget being handcuffed and led into this prison and hearing that door clank over and shut. It's a sound that I will never forget. And I remember being in this gymnasium with 32 bunk beds, 64 women, and crying in my pillow, screaming, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. And that's exactly where I belonged. All I did was get a consequence for an action that I took. I put myself there. For the first 3 years of my incarceration, I was in the maximum security part of the prison. And I was angry. And I knew I would drink again. I knew exactly what I would buy. I knew where I would hide it if I had to. I knew what it would feel like when it went down my throat and the warmness in my belly, and then I would find that ease and comfort once again that alcohol provides to me. And I go to a meeting of Al-Anon because they don't have AA in the maximum security part of the prison, which I never understood. 85% of the people incarcerated are there for drug or alcohol-related problems, right? And you're giving me Al-Anon. No offense to the program of Al-Anon, but I didn't need Al-Anon. I'm not here because my mom drank. I'm not here because my husband is an alcoholic. I'm here because of the consequences of my actions. So I don't do that anymore. I'd made one friend in Florida, and she was as sick as I was, right? Just because sick attracts sick. And she actually came to see me while I was in prison. And she brought me all of your Alcoholics Anonymous literature, which I thought, well, that's a waste of time because I got no use for this. But I didn't throw it away. I put it in my bin under my bed, and I left it there. And after 3 years, I was reclassified to the minimum security part of the prison. And there was a program that was available called Puppies Behind Bars. And it's a program where inmates raise dogs for law enforcement. And I thought, well, maybe this is something that would help me. You know, the maximum security part of the prison was so different from minimum. Now I could see trees and I could see cars on the highway, and it wasn't just dirt and barbed wire. Don't get me wrong, there's still barbed wire. But it was different, and I thought if I could get into this program, maybe it would help me, because at this point, I'm not doing time, the time is doing me. So I get involved in this program, and I realize a couple of things. I realize I love dogs. I love dogs. And after 4 months, they gave me my first dog to raise. It was a 8-week-old black Labrador retriever named Sandy. And when they put this puppy in my arms, something changed. Something in my heart just changed, and I realized for the first time in my life, I am free. Here I am sitting in a prison, but I'm free. I don't remember the last time I thought about a drink or a drug. I don't remember it, and I never thought something like this was possible for me. And AA was available in this part of the prison, and I started going to AA meetings. And I took out that literature that I had no use for, and I did the best I could with what I had. And I went on to raise 3 dogs in this program. And what I learned was that these dogs, this opportunity, started one by one removing all the bricks of the walls that I had built around myself. And I realized that no matter what, these dogs loved me. They didn't care who I was or what I had done. They loved me unconditionally. And I began to have a little bit of hope. Eventually, I became eligible for parole, and I was absolutely certain I wasn't going to get it, right? You're not going to give me parole. And I went through the process. It took 10.5 weeks. And they did grant me parole via the Interstate Compact, which meant I could go to Florida and do my 4.5-year parole time. On the day I was released, my brother showed up at the prison with a pack of cigarettes, a pack of cigarettes, and my plane ticket and $30 from my mother. And he was not happy with me. He was so angry with me. There was very little conversation. And what I do remember is when he dropped me off in front of Newark Airport, I got my stuff. I said, thank you for the ride. I stepped outside, and it was about 20 below with the wind chill factor. And I had a khaki coat on that said inmate on the back of it. And I was so humiliated that I took the coat off and I shoved it in the garbage and I walked into the airport. And it occurred to me that I don't know what I'm doing. It's been such a long time since I've made a decision on my own. It's been such a long time since I've been in an airport, and it's post 9/11. So now there's heightened security, and you have to go through those lines and your shoes and everything, and I don't know what I'm doing. So eventually I get in line behind these 2 older women, and I'm standing there in my gray sweatpants and my gray T-shirt, and they're complaining because they have to take their shoes off. And I'm thinking, my security checkpoints have been a little more invasive up till this point. Just get out of my way. Just get out of my way, because I'll do it. I'll strip. I'll bend over. I'll lift them. I'll cough. Whatever you need me to do, I'm doing to get to the other side of this thing. And so I did, and my sister picked me up at the airport, and she brought me back to her home, where she proceeded to give me that meal. You know, what's the first meal that you want? Right? I want steak. I want broccoli. I want mint chocolate chip ice cream. And she gave it to me on an orange tray with a spork. And that's how my family loves me. And that husband of hers who had dragged me to AA meetings is no longer sober. He's drinking. And my sister's afraid. And I couldn't go live with my mother because they wouldn't accept convicted felons where she lives, so I had no choice but to go with my sister. And I see her dying inside. I see her afraid for me. She's afraid I'm going to start drinking again too, which would mean an immediate return to prison. So I know the only thing I know absolutely the only thing that's going to work for me is I need to get to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went to my first meeting. And as I opened the door, the very first person I saw on the other side of that door was the girl who had come to see me from Florida and brought me all the AA material. And I knew God was there. And I sat down and, and I did all those things that you tell me to do that I didn't want to do. I put my hand up and I said, my name is Rose and I'm an alcoholic and I just got out of prison. And I got a temporary sponsor. And I didn't drink and I went to meetings. And part of my sentence was that when I was released from prison, I lost my license for 15 years. It started the day I was released from incarceration. So here I am, this convicted felon without a license trying to find a job in Florida. It was awful. It was awful. Nobody would hire me. There's a big food chain, Publix, which is a really nice food chain, and they actually extended an offer to me until they got my background check back, and then they rescinded it. And I was filled with fear. How am I going to survive? How am I going to pay my fines? How am I going to pay for my supervision? Because I'm on parole if I can't get a job. But I didn't drink and I went to meetings. I started looking for that permanent sponsor, for the person in the room that has what you want. And I saw this woman and you could tell she loved AA. She loved it. And that's what I knew I needed because I had to love AA. If I didn't love AA, I was screwed. I was in trouble. And she did have everything I want. She had diamond rings on, she had a great car, she had pretty nails, and that's what I wanted because those things have always fixed me in the past. So I keep seeing this woman and I at meetings all over the place and I want to ask her, but I'm afraid to ask her. And eventually I went to her and I said, would you sponsor me? And she said, I was hoping you would ask. And she started me on my journey of recovery in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But you see, I'm on a manhunt. I'm still looking for a job, but I'm on a manhunt. Because you cannot convince me that there's nothing with a man, a motorcycle, and a house that won't fix me. And I'm struggling because I'm still not working. And one of my friend Kristen, who had brought me the material, said, ask this lady for a ride. She's really easy. She's going to pick you up. You'll have rides to meetings. Just do it. So I was going to ask this lady, and before I had a chance, she slid her number across the table and said, if you ever need a ride, just call me. And I thought, sweet, I don't have to do the work. And so I did call her, and that next Monday she picked me up to take me to a meeting, and she said, how's the job search going, Rose? And I said, no, not so good. And she said, well, this place is hiring. You might want to look into that. And I said, okay, thanks. Great. Super. And at this point, I'm doing 2 days at a car wash that somebody in the program owns and a couple of days house cleaning for his wife who owns her own business, but I'm not really working full time, and I'm afraid. I'm filled with fear. So the next week, she picks me up again, and she said, how's that job search going, Rose? And I said, oh, not so good. And she said, well, I really think that you need to call this place. They're hiring. I said, oh, okay, great. Thanks a lot. So good to see you. And so the next week she picks me up again and she says, Rose, how's the job search going? And I go, not so good. She goes, have you called this place? And I go, no. What is that place? She goes, I own it. Would you just show up on Thursday? And that's how my life works. And I worked for this lady for 7 years. I started answering the phones, and then I managed her business for her. She owned a pizzeria. And my life started getting better. And my sponsor knew, without exception, that I was looking for a man to fix me, so she made the dreaded of all dreaded suggestions. I think you need to go to women's meetings. Look, I've been locked up for 6 years and 3 days. There's nothing at a women's meeting I'm looking for. So I say, but I do what I'm told, unwillingly, defiantly, because that's how I like to do this program. I often think that if there was a picture of the words, how not to do AA, it would be my picture. Because I fight it. I make an easy program difficult. Because I'm so self-will driven. So I go to these women's meetings, and I decide, you know what, I just give up. I'm just not going to look for a man, even though I'd picked out 4 potential husbands. 4 of them. And this is where I always like to give the sponsorship a plug. Thank God for proper sponsorship. Because 3 of these guys, oh my God, was my picker broken. I mean, I look back and I physically cringe. Like, what the hell was I thinking? So I am grateful for unanswered prayers. So I go to women's meetings. I'm not on a manhunt anymore. And when I stopped looking for a man, one found me. He was a sober man in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he was a good man. United States Marine, Italian American, alcoholic. A handful, just like me. And this was the first relationship, healthy relationship, sober relationship that either one of us had ever been in. And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't easy. There were moments I had to learn how to stay in my lane. I had to learn how to not take his inventory. I had to learn how to be a partner because I didn't know how to do any of those things. Prior to entering into this relationship, my sponsor had me write down on a piece of paper all the things I was looking for in a man. And I can't do anything in the positive because I'm not just negative, I'm cynical. So I wrote everything I didn't want in a man. And as she read it, and she agreed with so much of what I had written, she said to me, so what exactly do you have to bring to this relationship? Well, I hadn't counted on that question. Because I'm counting on him to fix me. And she knew that. And she knew I'd never recover if I didn't work on myself. So I'm with this man, and things are going great, and he's going to meetings, and I'm going to meetings. We're going to meetings together. And my life just keeps getting better and better and better. Then all of a sudden, I get angry with this sponsor. She told me she didn't like the way I dressed. So I fired her. What she was trying to do was she was trying to show me that I needed to be a woman of grace and dignity. She was trying to teach me that lesson, but I got angry. And I asked this other lady to be my sponsor. And this woman I thought was great AA, and I was so excited. And she told me that she heard me tell my story and that she didn't hear any remorse in my heart. And it devastated me. She said she thought that I needed outside help. And I almost drank. I remember for 3 days I struggled with, oh my God, there is such a pit in my stomach still. I would trade my life this second for this man. And this woman is telling me that she didn't hear any remorse. And eventually I said, you know what? I don't think this is going to work for me. And I went running back to that woman who told me to dress differently. A few years later, the man I was with, the Italian American Marine, who I always thought I was, more sober than him, had a better program than him, and he repeatedly would show me how to be a better person. And at first it would piss me off, and then it would give me that lesson that I needed to learn. I remember once I was traveling, and I was in one of the Carolinas, and I was feeling pretty sorry for myself because no matter when I go to the Carolinas, something happens. The plane hits a flock of birds, you're sitting on the tarmac because, there's some kind of a mechanical problem. It just always seems to happen. So here I am in the Carolinas, and I'm stuck there, and I do what every sober woman does. I go onto Facebook, and I start complaining. I'm stuck in this airport, blah, blah, blah. And people are sending me messages, oh my God, Rose, what can I do to help? I'm in South Carolina, we can drive down. And, I'm thinking, oh, thank you. Not realizing that here I am in an airport that's air-conditioned, drinking $5 coffees, complaining about this horrible life that I have. And Stephen commented, and it went something like this. Suck it up, Buttercup. Where would you be without the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and the opportunities that it affords you? And that's just one of the many ways that he would remind me to be a better person. He fell out of love with AA. He had a situation happen with his sponsor, and he stopped going to meetings. And it devastated me. But I continued to go. And then I realized I was going to less and less meetings. And next thing you know, I'm maybe doing one meeting a week. And I think it's okay. Around this time, he got quite sick. He had a condition called bullous emphysema. And what they call it is vanishing lung syndrome. It's where your lungs actually break apart and they vanish. And he'd had a very severe lung bleed. And he was given maybe 4 to 5 years to live. And I was devastated with that because I loved him so much. So I'm going to maybe one meeting a week, and then COVID happens, right? And COVID made it easy not to go to any meetings at all because I'm going to protect him. I can't bring anything home to this man. He's got lung issues, right? And I became extremely complacent. I'm doing a couple of Zoom meetings here or there, and then I'm only doing it if you ask me to speak, and I'm only going to a meeting if someone's asked me to share my story there. And I realize that my life is empty. I realize that I've lost the joy of living, and I don't like who I am anymore. And I know the answer is AA. In 2022, I changed jobs. I started working for probably one of the finest men I've ever met in my life. It's a construction company, and I fit right in. And I got my license back on October 31st of 2022. And I always said when I got my license back, everything's going to change, man. I'm going to go to meetings, and it's going to be good. And this man gave me a car and a gas card, and he paid 6 months worth of insurance for me. And I did. I started going to meetings, random meetings here or there, nothing consistent, certainly not being a part of the pack, sitting in the corner, which reminded me of a description that somebody had of me when I first started going to meetings. He said I looked like a caged animal in the corner. And I've never forgotten those words. And here I am thinking that when I walk in these rooms, people are going to A, know who I am, or B, think that I relapsed. And the simple fact of the matter is, nobody even knew who I was or cared. The meetings I was going to, for the most part, nobody even said, "Hi, welcome. There's the coffee," nothing. But I kept going to meetings. And in March of last year, Stephen had a massive heart attack. And he died in my arms while I was giving him CPR. His greatest fear that he would be alone and he would die alone, and that didn't happen. And for that, I'll be eternally grateful. But as soon as he died, a couple of things went through my head. 3 times I thought about drinking. I thought that that would be the solution to my pain. I needed the ease and comfort. But I'm able at this point to think this through, right? I know that that's not going to work. So I say, well, I need to get back to Alcoholics Anonymous. I need to find a home group. I need to be sponsored. I need to do these things because my life depends on it. And I go to a meeting, a unity meeting. And as I'm walking by this table, I hear a woman say, "Rose." And I turned, and it was the woman that had sponsored me twice before. And she grabbed my hand. She said, "Oh, it's so good to see you." She said, "Call me." And I did. I called her, and we went out to dinner, and we talked, and we cried. And I knew that the only answer for my life was Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew I had to get that joy of living. I knew I had to have a program. I knew I needed to get back on track. And she looked at me, and I said, "Would you sponsor me again?" And she said, "I was hoping you would ask." And she made, not suggestions, she made demands. You will go to 3 meetings a week minimum. 2 of those will be women's meetings. You get to decide on the 3rd. You will reach out and offer to sponsor women. And I did everything that she asked me to do. And I worked through my grief. I felt grief before in my life, but this was like a weight on my chest, and I couldn't take a deep breath, and I didn't know if I would ever feel better, but I didn't drink, and I went to meetings, and I took all of her suggestions. And I started to feel better. I realized one day on the way to the Saturday morning women's meeting, I was actually singing. And because I did these things that she had suggested of me, I was able to work through grief that I never thought I would be able to, and I was finding joy again, that very joy that I had lost. She told me to go to this gratitude dinner, and I didn't want to go, but it doesn't matter if I want to do it or I don't want to do it. At this point, I'm just willing to do whatever she tells me to do. And it may be unwillingly, but I still do it because she knows better than me. And as I'm at this meeting, I'm walking through a doorway, and for whatever reason, I just happened to glance up, and there was a man standing there that I've known for many, many years, but I hadn't seen in like 7 or 8 years. And we started talking. And he said, I would like to take you out to dinner, but I'm going to wait till after the holidays. Because he's a sober man in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he knew I needed to get through these holidays and process the loss. Thanksgiving is always going to be hard for me because that's when I killed someone, but it would be my first Thanksgiving without Stephen. It would be my first Christmas without Stephen, and he knew that, and he was smart enough. And this man does tremendous amounts of service in Alcoholics Anonymous. He doesn't do one jail commitment, he does 2. He sponsors men. He's good AA. So eventually, in January, he called me, and we went out to dinner, and then we went out to lunch, and then we went out to breakfast, and then we took motorcycle rides. He was that 4th man. He was the man that I had the big crush on, that I picked out for a future husband, but he was involved with someone else and it didn't work out. And here he is. And he said to me, I'd like to take you for a bike ride tonight, and I love motorcycles. And he doesn't have 1 Harley Davidson, he has 5. And I said, okay, and he said, let's go watch a sunset. And he took me to the very place that my parents used to take me to give me 5 moments of peace. And I knew God was in this. I'll be forever grateful for the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've learned so much, and where I am in my recovery now is I just want to be a better person. I just want to be a good human being. I just want not to cause any more harm or any more damage. Everything that's good in my life is because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it didn't start till I did the work. It didn't start till I worked the steps. I remember when my mother was very ill, she was in hospice, and she called all of her children in one by one to have that last conversation with them. And it was my turn, and I didn't know how this was going to go, because my mother was that person in step 9 where it says when to do so would injure them or others. I couldn't vomit my 9th step on her like I wanted to do because I wanted to feel better. I had to do it incrementally. She would ask me questions over the years because she could only take so much. And I allowed her to decide how this was going to go. And that's the only reason I did that, was because I had proper sponsorship. That she said, don't do that. She'll determine how this is going to go. And so when she called me in for that meeting, and she's sitting on her bed, and I know she's dying in front of me, she says a couple of things to me. She said, please take care of your sister. And I said, I will. And she said, and I just want you to know that I am so proud of the woman that you are. And I had completed that. I knew my 9th step was complete. I knew that all that pile, all that stuff, all the harm I had caused this woman was done. Every relationship that I've been able to mend or to cultivate or to forge is because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Every time I show up for my life and I'm able to be a contributing member in the world is because of Alcoholics Anonymous. They told me I'd never vote again, you'll never be able to take a meeting in the jail. I've done those things because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I thought my life was so bad I could never recover from it, I ran to Alcoholics Anonymous. And once again, I learned how to live comfortably in my skin. I always read something when I speak. It was given to me in the puppy program that I was in, and it kind of sums up to me how I feel about AA. See, I had a God of my understanding, and I walked away from that God because I couldn't live the way I was living and have this relationship. So when I came back to AA, I had to use the group as my higher power because I was so filled with guilt, shame, and remorse that I couldn't connect with the God that I knew. And unless I did that work, unless I did that 4th step, 5th step, 8th step, 9th step, 10th step, all the steps, was I able to get this relationship of which I now have. And if you haven't heard it, my God is big. If yours isn't working, I encourage you to borrow mine because he's big. So this was given to me, and it kind of sums up how I feel about everything. It says, it's from Mother Teresa. And it says, people are often unreasonable and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are honest, people may cheat you. Be honest anyway. If you find happiness, people may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best that you have, and it may never be enough, but give your best anyway. For you see, in the end, it's between you and God. It was never about them anyway. I love the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I will never be able to repay what it has given me in my life. The only thing that ever made sense to me was the language of the heart. When you would share, and I could hear your heart, it connected with me, and I became part of, not that caged animal sitting in the corner. I hope this morning that somehow you have been able to hear my heart. Thank you for letting me share.